The messages get shorter, the warmth starts to fade, the long explanations stop, and then one day, the person who once gave chance after chance is gone in a way that feels final, like a door that was there yesterday and is now just a wall. That is the part most people never understand. An empath usually leaves inside long before they leave in real life. The body starts stepping back before the feet ever do. In psychology, this looks a lot like emotional withdrawal. It begins when the brain notices repeated emotional danger and slowly starts shutting down the bond to protect itself. The same parts of the brain linked to physical pain can also react to rejection and emotional betrayal. So to an empath, hurtful behavior does not feel small. It does not feel like just words. Their system can experience it like real damage. And once the nervous system decides someone is no longer safe, a deep shift begins. At first, the empath does not run. They usually try harder. They talk more. They explain better. They forgive what should never have been forgiven. They carry the weight of conversations alone. They replay every moment in their head, trying to fix the tone, the timing, the meaning, anything that might bring peace back. Not because they are weak, because they feel everything so strongly that peace becomes a need, not a luxury. Conflict hits them harder. Negativity stays longer. A cold reply cuts deeper than most people know. And this is where many people make the biggest mistake. They confuse patience with forever. They think they care too much to leave. They will understand me again. They will stay. But that belief is exactly how people lose empaths for good. Every ignored feeling becomes proof. Every broken promise becomes a mark the body remembers. Every disrespectful moment gets stored quietly inside the nervous system. Empaths do not usually explode out of nowhere. They fade after too much has piled up. That is what people miss. The final goodbye is rarely about one argument. It is about the full weight of many moments that were never repaired. Stress that stays too long inside the body changes everything. When emotional tension never gets resolved, the system stays on alert. It keeps producing stress chemicals. It keeps scanning for danger. And over time, the empath's mind shifts from connection to protection. That is when something almost scary starts replacing their softness. Clarity. They stop defending your behavior. They stop making excuses for what hurt them. They stop trying to heal wounds they did not create. On the outside, they may still seem calm. They may still answer. They may still smile. But inside, the bond is already dying. And here is the part that shocks people later. When an empath finally stops reacting, it often means the detachment has already happened. The silence is not weakness. It is closure happening in real time. The person who once wrote long messages now sends one line. The person who once begged to talk now just says, "It's fine." Not because they stopped caring in one night, but because caring started costing too much. The opposite of love is not always hate. Sometimes it is indifference. And when an empath reaches that point, they rarely return the same. Stay with this, because this is where it gets heavier. Empaths can carry pain for a very long time. Not because they enjoy it, but because they keep choosing understanding over self-protection until one hard question rises inside them: who is protecting me? When the answer becomes no one, the empath changes in a way that is not dramatic on the outside, but life-changing on the inside. This is survival, not cruelty. The nervous system begins to reduce emotional investment because it has to save energy somewhere. The heart stops volunteering for places where it keeps getting mishandled. And most people only understand the empath's value after that warmth is gone. Because empaths give things many people depend on without even noticing. They give emotional safety. They give real listening. They give calm, intense rooms. They absorb pressure. They hold space. They often carry the emotional side of relationships in silence while everyone else acts like that labor costs nothing. So when people say an empath left because of one final fight, that is almost never the full truth. Usually the body simply cannot survive the buildup anymore. Every moment they felt unseen. Every time they stood next to someone they loved and still felt emotionally alone. Every time their pain was minimized, laughed off, delayed, or turned back on them. The body remembers. Highly sensitive people often absorb emotional environments the way a sponge takes in water. What another person brushes off in minutes, an empath may carry for days or weeks. One cold sentence, one humiliating moment, one night of emotional neglect. It stays. But instead of naming the damage right away, they often excuse it. They say maybe you were stressed. Maybe you did not mean it. Maybe things will get better soon. And while they keep understanding everybody else, nobody notices that they are disappearing on the inside. Emotional overload does not always arrive like a fire. Sometimes it rises like water in a locked room, quiet, slow, relentless, until there is no air left. And the human body was never built to live under that kind of pressure forever. That is why some empaths are not only emotionally tired, they are physically worn down by pain no one can see. They still smile. They still show up. They still help other people. They still answer calls and say, "I'm okay," even while their whole system is begging for relief. That is why empaths often look normal right before they disappear. The collapse happened long before the exit. Emotional exhaustion changes behavior in ways people often read wrong. The person who once explained everything becomes quiet. The one who fought for the relationship stops arguing at all. The one who cried now just stares into space. It can look like they no longer care. But often the truth is much sadder. The nervous system has moved into survival mode. After enough failed attempts to be heard, the brain can start believing effort changes nothing. And once the mind learns that lesson, it stops spending energy where it expects more pain. That is why the last stage before an empath leaves is often numbness. And numbness is dangerous because once pain stops shocking them, distance starts feeling peaceful. In the beginning, they still hope. They ask for honesty. They ask for steadiness. They ask for respect. Not because they are needy, but because emotional safety is a human need. Healthy closeness helps regulate the body. It lowers stress. It brings steadiness. But emotional inconsistency does the opposite. One day warm, next day cold. One moment close, next moment rejecting. That pattern can trap a person deeply because unpredictability keeps hope alive. The empath keeps waiting for the loving version of you to return and stay. But the body burns out from the uncertainty. Then one day the empath sees something they can no longer unsee. The person they defended the most is also the person draining their nervous system the most. That moment changes everything. Once that truth enters the mind, the withdrawal speeds up. The text gets shorter, the eye contact changes, the warmth fades, not because they want revenge, because they are trying to stop the bleeding. Here is what most people miss. The empath was not too sensitive. They were overloaded. Long periods of emotional stress can affect sleep, focus, digestion, memory, mood, even the immune system. So when an empath begins pulling away, it is not always a dramatic choice. Sometimes it is the body forcing a decision the heart kept delaying. Many empaths blame themselves while this is happening. They think they are too emotional, too hard to love, too affected by things other people seem to handle easily. But their reaction is often exactly what a human system does under too much unresolved pain. They are not broken. They are overwhelmed. An overload changes people. It makes loud places feel exhausting. It makes simple conversations feel heavy. It makes small conflicts feel huge because the body has already spent too long in fight or flight mode. Some empaths get sick trying to keep relationships alive that are quietly hurting them. That is why leaving eventually becomes necessary. Not dramatic, necessary. A terrible realization rises in them. If I stay here, I will lose myself. And when survival finally becomes stronger than attachment, they go quiet. They leave softly. They step back without noise because by that point the loudest battle has already happened inside. This is why the people who lose empaths are often stunned. They say, "You changed. You got cold. You gave up too fast." But they never saw the months of overthinking, the nights without sleep, the panic behind the smile, the silent tears. They only noticed the exit, not the damage that made the exit necessary. By the time the empath finally walks away, the nervous system has already learned a harsh lesson. Peace feels safer than attachment. And once someone truly learns that in their body, not just in their mind, they rarely go back to the people who taught it to them. The most dangerous part of a relationship is not always the fight, not the raised voice, not even the betrayal you can point to. Sometimes it is the silence that comes after too many wounds. Because when an empath goes quiet, something important has already died inside the connection. And by the time other people understand the silence, it is often far too late to undo what happened. At first, they still react because they still believe the connection can be saved. They try to explain with patience. They choose careful words. They replay every conflict in search of a softer ending. Highly empathetic people often monitor feelings deeply. They pick up tone, mood, distance, tension. Their system notices small shifts fast. That means a cold conversation does not simply pass through them. It sits in them. It echoes. A dismissive comment can replay all day. A blank look can become hours of internal processing. Their mind keeps scanning for emotional safety because harmony feels necessary for survival. But over time, something heartbreaking begins to happen. They stop believing their feelings matter. After repeated invalidation, the brain starts learning that speaking up changes nothing. So the nervous system adapts by becoming quieter. This is why an empath's silence is never random. Silence is often what comes after emotional exhaustion has burned through every other option. The long paragraphs disappear. The late night talks stop. The vulnerable honesty fades. And this confuses people because many expect pain to look loud. But the deepest pain often looks empty. It looks like a person who no longer argues, a person who shrugs, a person who says less because saying more only opened the door to more hurt. The quiet is not peace yet, it is protection. And by the time that quiet appears on the outside, the attachment may already be collapsing on the inside. Because empaths do not detach on impulse, they detach after being disappointed too many times. Every broken promise weakens trust. Every ignored wound trains the body to stop expecting safety from the same person. Eventually, caring itself starts to feel dangerous. Think about how heavy that is. Imagine loving someone so deeply that your own nervous system starts reading that love as a threat. That changes a person. It drains the energy needed for closeness. It makes silence feel easier than one more letdown. And once an empath discovers that silence hurts less than disappointment, detachment begins to move fast. Not because they turned cold overnight, because they are depleted, deeply, quietly, completely depleted. They once cared so much that they ignored their own limits. They tolerated mixed signals, excuses, neglect dressed up as misunderstanding, disrespect hidden behind stress or mood. They kept hoping empathy would heal what both people were supposed to care for. But empathy without return becomes self-destruction. And the body eventually pushes back against self-destruction. That pushback looks like distance. It looks like not reacting anymore. It looks like not begging for clarity. It looks like no longer asking for honesty because part of them is already grieving while still standing in the relationship. That is another truth many people miss. Empaths often start grieving long before anything officially ends. They mourn the connection in private, slowly, silently. Every disappointment becomes another small funeral for the version of the relationship they believed in. So when the final quiet arrives, it is not punishment, it is acceptance. And that is why the silence feels so haunting. There is no explosion attached to it, no big final scene. One day they simply stop reaching. They stop leaning in. They stop trying to pull life back into something that has been dying for a long time. And that stillness unsettles people because human beings feel emotional withdrawal immediately. The moment warmth is gone, panic often shows up. Suddenly now they want to talk. Now they want honesty. Now they notice the absence. But the empath system may already be elsewhere. That is the brutal part. Their silence is usually built from many injuries that were ignored when they were still speaking. That is what makes it tragic. They tried, again and again, until the brain finally chose peace over connection. Emotional burnout can make warm people look detached for a while, not because they are playing games, because the body has run out of emotional fuel. And once the empath reaches that place, solitude often starts to heal them. Quiet rooms feel safer than heavy conversations. Distance feels safer than unstable closeness. Isolation feels better than vulnerability because their system has linked attachment with exhaustion. This is why silence from an empath can feel colder than anger. Anger still carries emotional investment. Silence often means the investment is leaving. And once that investment is gone, the relationship becomes very hard to bring back to life. Trust is everything. Without trust, the nervous system keeps scanning for danger, and no one can live in that state forever without paying a price. Eventually, the body demands escape. That is when the empath disappears in a way people do not expect. Not because they wanted to stop loving, but because loving without safety became too costly. And the sad part is that many only understand the silence when the damage is already too deep to reverse. Because silence is not where the wound started. Silence is where the wound finally became final. By then, the empath has spent every emotional resource they had trying to save the bond. Now they are not fighting for love anymore. They are fighting for inner peace. And once that switch happens, something surprising begins after they leave. They often start looking healthier. The same person who seemed drained for months begins sleeping better, thinking clearer, breathing easier. Their face softens. Their energy changes. This is not imagined. It is recovery. A toxic bond is often more than a hard relationship. It can become a long-term state of nervous system survival. When an empath stays in emotional chaos too long, the body keeps producing stress chemicals it was never meant to hold for that long. And many do not realize they are becoming physically unwell from emotional pain. Stress can disturb sleep. It can affect digestion. It can weaken the immune system. It can raise blood pressure. It can keep the mind foggy and the body tense. That means emotional suffering is not just in your head. The body carries it too. And empaths often carry more than the people around them understand. They absorb mood shifts. They feel conflict in the room before anyone speaks. They sense tension in pauses. They notice pain under people's words. That level of awareness is exhausting. Imagine living every day with a system that reacts deeply to inconsistency, rejection, disappointment, and unspoken strain. Then imagine remaining in that environment for months or years. Of course, the body begins to bend under the pressure. Of course, the mind gets tired. Of course, the soul starts craving escape. Here is the shift. The empath finally realizes, I cannot heal where I keep getting hurt. And once they truly understand that, everything starts to change. When they choose peace over chaos, the body responds almost immediately. Sleep may improve. Their thoughts may feel less crowded. Their chest may feel lighter. Their mood may stop swinging with someone else's instability. In simple words, leaving emotional toxicity can change the body itself. That is why empaths often seem transformed after they walk away. Not because they never cared, because their system finally stopped drowning. Silence stops feeling painful and starts feeling calm. The absence of conflict feels almost unreal. The mind slows down. The body, maybe for the first time in a long time, begins to feel safe. And emotional safety is one of the most overlooked needs in life. Not just physical safety, emotional safety. The ability to exist without always bracing for rejection, coldness, lies, manipulation, or mood swings. When an empath finally tastes that kind of peace, the contrast is shocking. They often realize only then how exhausted they truly were. This is also why many isolate after leaving unhealthy relationships. Not because they hate people, because quiet feels healing. Calm helps the body reset. The nervous system begins coming out of survival and moving toward recovery. In that space, they start hearing themselves again. Music sounds richer. Food tastes better. Mornings feel less heavy. The constant checking, overthinking, and emotional scanning begin to fade. And sometimes that freedom hits them hard because they suddenly see how much pain they had normalized. No more staring at the phone. No more decoding every message. No more walking on emotional eggshells. That kind of relief can feel like breathing after being underwater too long. Peace is not only emotional, it reaches the body. It changes posture, expression, energy, presence. That is why people often notice an empath glowing after they leave. The tension begins to leave their face. Their body is recovering from a private war. And that is often the moment the people who hurt them start noticing what they lost. Because the empath's emotional labor is gone. The endless understanding is gone. The calm they brought into the room is gone. And suddenly the absence becomes louder than their presence ever seemed. That is the irony. Some only value the empath when the comfort they gave is no longer available. People often underestimate empaths because empathy looks gentle. But it is one of the most expensive traits a person can have. Feeling deeply has a cost, especially when that depth is used, ignored, or mishandled. So when an empath chooses peace, that is not selfishness. It is self-preservation. The nervous system was never meant to live inside endless emotional instability. At some point, the body asks for healing, and healing sometimes needs distance from the people causing the harm. This becomes one of the biggest turning points in the empath's life. For years, they may have believed love meant sacrifice, endurance, and staying no matter what. But peace teaches them something stronger. Real love should not tear apart your nervous system. Real connection should not make your body feel unsafe. Once they truly learn that, they rebuild differently. They become more selective, more careful with access, more aware of emotional manipulation, not colder, wiser. Pain can teach the body what to fear, but healing teaches the body what it deserves. And for many empaths, that lesson changes the rest of their life. Once they feel the relief of emotional peace, they cannot fully return to places that crush their spirit. Their body remembers too well the insomnia, the anxiety, the exhaustion, the panic hidden behind polite smiles. The system does not forget long periods of suffering. That is why healed empaths become quieter about who they let close. Not because they stopped loving deeply, but because they finally learned that guarding their peace is also guarding their health. And in the end, that may be the greatest shift of all. The empath who once begged for closeness begins to understand something that changes everything. Peace feels better than being emotionally needed by people who keep hurting them. That truth does not make them heartless. It makes them free. And if you are still watching this in your mind, really listen to this next part because it may be the line that stays with you. An empath does not disappear because they had no love left. They disappear because love was there for too long without safety, without care, without real repair. And no heart, no matter how deep, can survive that forever. So if you ever see an empath becoming quieter, becoming simpler, becoming less emotionally available, do not assume they are just in a mood. Do not assume there is unlimited time left. That quiet may be the last warning before the bond goes dark. They may already be tired in ways they cannot even explain anymore. They may already be grieving. They may already be pulling their energy back from a place that taught them to feel unsafe. And once that process gets far enough, it rarely reverses with promises alone. Because words spoken at the end cannot erase months or years of what the body learned in silence. The system believes patterns more than speeches. It believes what happens again and again. So if someone keeps dismissing the empath while the empath is still trying, they are making a mistake that often cannot be repaired later. The most painful part is that empaths usually do not leave hating anyone. They leave heartbroken. They leave tired. They leave after giving more understanding than many people ever deserved. They leave with love still in them, but with trust finally gone. And when trust is gone, love has nowhere safe to land. That is why the final exit can feel so calm, so clean, so absolute. There is no energy left for drama, only distance. Only the quiet decision to stop bleeding in the same place. And after enough time passes, the empath may not even miss the chaos the way others expect. They may miss the dream of what the connection could have been, yes, but they do not miss the damage. They do not miss the confusion. They do not miss becoming smaller just to keep the peace. They begin to understand that peace was never supposed to cost them their voice, their sleep, their health, or their sense of self. And once that understanding settles into the body, the return becomes unlikely. Because now they know something they did not know before. They know what calm feels like. They know what safety feels like. They know what it means to wake up without dread. And after that, going back feels less like love and more like betrayal of the self. That is why when an empath finally disappears, it often feels sudden to everyone except the empath. For them, the leaving started a long time ago. The silence was growing. The distance was building. The goodbye was forming in pieces. And when it finally arrived, it was not the beginning of the end. It was only the moment the end became visible.